It's Super NFL Wildcard Weekend, baby. And welcome to an all-new season for 2021 of the Second City Sports Weekend Edition, Zoom style.
Zoom style.
Along with Lakina McGee, I am Sydney Brown. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter and the Insta at SidKid80. Once again, that's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You can follow me at Keena McGee on Twitter and at Keena_McGee on the IG.
You can follow this podcast, Second City Sports, along with our other podcast programming from War Media. First, go to our website, weareregalradio.com. That's WEAREREGAL radio.com. And you can follow us wherever you download your podcasts, including that iHeartRadio app, by simply typing in that search engine box, War on Anchor. That's WARR on Anchor. You can also find us on YouTube at War Media. Once again, at WARR Media. You can not only listen to us, but watch us. Look alive.
Look alive. Here we go. Like, share, and subscribe.
Yes.
Get those likes up.
As I mentioned before, this is Super NFL Wildcard Weekend. 6 games going on this weekend, 3 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday. Since we are a Chicago-based podcast, we will focusing on our home team first, the Chicago Bears. They will travel to the Bayou to face the New Orleans Saints this Sunday at 3:40 p.m. Central Standard Time on CBS and Nickelodeon. We'll get to that Nickelodeon broadcast later. The Bears are coming in as a wildcard team, the number 7 seed in the NFC with an 8-8 record. The New Orleans Saints are the number 2 seed following the NFC South Division Championship, beating out the Tampa Bay Buccaneers by 1 game with 12 wins and 4 losses. And Lakina, before we start breaking this down, of course, the Saints have beaten the Bears the last 3 times, including the last 2 games here in Chicago, including the latest game this season back on November 1st at Soldier Field. That was a 26-23 victory by the Saints in overtime. Of course, for Chicago, Nick Foles was quarterback. He didn't have a great game, but Alvin Kamara did, and Drew Brees had a good enough game to keep himself upright. Lakina, I'm listening to everybody and their mama, as the kids would say, throughout the Chicago sports landscape as I could this week. I tried to limit that. And I'll say this, for the consensus that I got, it's a pretty foregone conclusion that the Bears will not show up in this game. They'll get blown out. Maybe they'll do a couple things here and there. We'll give out our picks later, but I kind of have the feeling that the Bears will do some things. What, I don't know, but that injury report looks a little suspect to me. So give everybody the latest update on the Bears injury report.
Well, it's been sort of kind of confusing, right? From what Jalen Johnson was a full participant yesterday. That's what some of the various reports are saying. Now they're saying Duke Shelley may be questionable. Allen Robinson has a hamstring injury. He's questionable. Darnell Mooney, who was injured in last week's game against the Packers. Now he's questionable. So, and Devin Bush is out. That's already been announced. So it's a little bit it's sort of weird because we didn't hear about this injury with A-Rob, the hamstring injury. So is there something kind of funky going on there? Now, like I said, Johnson was a full participant, so that helps a little bit, but it looks like Roquan Smith is out, even though that hasn't been official yet. But I mean, it is sort of suspect, the injuries. If you look at the injury list for the Bears and, the injuries themselves, the percent injuries, even though there's some that are probably keeping it secret, but it is a little bit sort of like, okay, you scratch your head, you're thinking, what's going on here?
I want to focus in on Roquan Smith first. I had this thought for the last couple of days. Of course, as you mentioned, he was injured with that elbow in the regular season finale last Sunday against the Packers. What the Bears do, especially defensively from the linebacking core, Roquan Smith is the youngest, is the best out of that linebacking core out there. You could talk about Khalil Mack, who has a Pro Bowl berth this year, but he doesn't have the stats to back it up. You could talk about Robert Quinn, who's had a disappointing year. You could talk about Danny Gervais, that he's a veteran, but he may be on his last legs as a Chicago Bear. But with that being said, without Roquan Smith's youth and versatility back there in that linebacking core, this Bears defense is exposed even more. We all know that they have struggled through the month of December. If Roquan Smith is out for Sunday's game against New Orleans, that's going to be trouble for that Bears defense. Yes, the Saints can attack the middle if they want to, but if you can remember back in the regular season matchup against the Saints, what did Sean Payton, the head coach of New Orleans Saints, do? He put Alvin Kamara in the backfield using screens, and Alvin Kamara ran up the middle and down the sidelines. I can see Sean Payton doing that again, not for the whole game, but picking the spots and when to do that. Assuming that Alvin Kamara plays, which I think he will, by the way. He missed last week's game at Carolina due to COVID. But if the Saints get off the ground running the ball early, that play action pass from Drew Brees and the screen game for Alvin Kamara and along with a couple other running backs, it's going to be a problem for Chicago.
Oh yeah, huge. And Kamara already tweeted out last night that he was going to play. So that looks like he's going to play there. But look, the Bears, if they give David Montgomery the ball, they keep him, chugging it down the field and keep Drew Brees and them off the field, that maybe they might have a chance here. But like you said, I think. Look, I know the Bears, they want to kind of feel like, no one's respecting them, and people say they're not belong. They want to feed off that energy. Fine, that's their prerogative. They want to play off that injury. But the Saints are on a mission. They've been knocked out in the wild card round the last 2 years, so they want to look. And this might be Drew Brees' last, playoff run. So I think they want to try and extend it. And, maybe perhaps take him to the Super Bowl. I mean, look, and remember, Mike Thomas didn't play in that earlier season meeting against the Bears, so it could have been even that score could even been, I know that they went into overtime and this and that, but you wonder if Thomas was 100%. He was a full participant all week and looks like he's going to play. So it's look. I mean, do I think this is going to be a blowout? No, but again, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, we'll do our picks, of course, later, but I feel kind of like, what? Yeah, I know some people say, well, funky things happen in a wild card, and yes, that's true. We see, upset or two here and there. The odds are probably even more now that we got 6 wild card games this weekend, but I just don't see it. I just don't see it happening. I don't see this game being one of those funky games, if you will.
You're listening to the weekend edition of Second City Sports, along with Lakina McGee. I am Sydney Brown, as we talk Bears and Saints along with the other 5 games through Super NFL Wildcard Weekend. Lakina, going back to that injury report for Chicago, of course, Cordell Patterson has missed the last couple of days of practice due to a personal issue. Hopefully everything's okay, whatever that is. Hopefully he can show up on Sunday for the Bears. Of course, he's the only and the best kick returner, I'm assuming, for both teams, especially for Chicago. And, of course, we all know that Matt Nagy is going to give him his occasional 2 to 3 carries. How important do you think Cordell Patterson is to this offense? I think I just gave it away.
Well, you did. I mean, exactly. I mean, I think you kind of gave away the playbook there. Field position, I think, is important because, look, he's one of the best, punt return guys, in recent years in the NFL. So you need him there, whatever. Hopefully, everything's okay, whatever that personal issue it was with him. Because I saw that, I was like, oh, I hope it's not, everything's okay in that front. But you need him because if you don't, I mean, we see what happens when he's not out there in special teams. It gets ugly pretty quick. So if he's not going to be out there, which there's no reason to think that he won't be, but if he isn't, I mean, that's going to be a big problem for the Bears and special teams. That's probably the one thing. He actually gives them a chance to have short field position. So that's, that might be a problem there in that front. But I mean, look, do I think the Bears have a shot? Of course they got a shot. I mean, and this time of year, like I said, like we were saying, funky things happen in wild card weekend. We've seen upsets and whatnot. We've seen it since the playoff field expanded. But I just think that the Saints can beat you so many ways with their offense. With Kamara and with Thomas, and Taysom Hill. Remember, I'm sure he's going to make an appearance, during the game on Sunday. So it's going to be very interesting. I think they have to. We saw what happened last week. They did the time of possession thing with Green Bay. The Bears did. It still didn't do them any good. They ended up getting their butts kicked. So it really, you if you're Matt Nagy, you kind of have to switch, sort of, think of another alternative because when you tried the time of possession thing last week, it didn't work. So yeah, you're kind of like stuck in a rock and a hard place.
You are, but I would disagree with you slightly. The time possession thing did work. The problem was last week, going back to that regular season finale against the Packers. The Bears defense didn't come up with any big plays. They only had one sack on Rodgers, and that was it. That was the problem. I would still stick with the game plan of running David Montgomery. The question is for the Bears. Well, and I said this last week around the Packers game, Jimmy Graham and Cole Kmet were not used enough in the passing game. They will have both of them will have to be used big time, especially if Allen Robinson doesn't play and Anthony Miller decides not to show up again. And heaven forbid that Darnell Mooney's injury keeps him out for this Sunday's game. Those tight ends, both of them, Graham and Kmet, will be used heavily, and they should. If they're not, this Bears defense is in trouble. You just run the ball with Montgomery. Of course, the Saints are going to put them 9 in the box to try to stop them, but if you don't use your tight ends, that's going to be a problem, and that goes on your head coach.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, it's going to be very interesting to see what schemes they're going to try and do. I mean, we know Sean Payton's willing to take some chances on special teams too. So I think the Bears got to look out for that as well. So what do you? Okay, if you look at Eddie Jackson and Kyle Fuller, matching up with Michael Thomas, I'm sure it's going to be Fuller. It's probably going to match up against him. Who do you see? Because he didn't have to, Fuller didn't have to worry about him, in the previous meeting because he didn't play. So where do you see that matchup?
Yeah, if Michael Thomas plays, which I assume he will, that's going to be a great matchup, as you mentioned, going up against Kyle Fuller. But I want to focus in on Eddie Jackson, which the name you just brought up. He's had a terrible year. Yes, part of it because the defensive front has been inconsistent, especially this last month on pressure and sacking quarterbacks. Eddie Jackson has been taking bad angles on some plays. I know early in the season he had a couple of touchdowns taken away from him because of penalties. Yes, that happens. But it seems like something, I'm not going to say mental, but I think it's more about confidence with him in positioning at times with him. He needs to have a big game on Sunday to give the Bears any hope in this game because, as we mentioned at the top of the show, they have a few injuries on that defensive front. So Eddie Jackson needs to come up huge because we all know this. Drew Brees rarely turns the ball over. And if you can force a couple of turnovers, especially early in that game, you'll give yourself a great chance to win.
Well, yeah, and also too the time of possession. Like I said, the time possession thing. Like I said before, I know that the Bears were able to beat out the Packers and that, but like I said, it didn't really too much any good because they scored more points than they did. So
I think it's more important for the Bears for time possession than the Saints because the Saints are mirrors like the Packers. They can score just like that on a couple of plays.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. That I like I said, I think they may have to, switch the plans up a little bit. But as far as the defenses, I mean, like you said, it looks like we're not going to have Roquan Smith out there for the Bears. I think that's huge for that front seven because he can slow offenses down. He did it for myriad of times, throughout the season. Now, as for the Saints defense, we'll talk more about this with Ross in a little bit. But what do you think? Because they actually started to kind of get it together as the season went on. Cam Jordan, he had that that snafu, if you will, a couple of games ago. He's been a little bit more disciplined. Janoris Jenkins, Malcolm Jenkins, no relation, has had, and also Marshawn Lattimore has been more of a factor in the secondary too. So, what do you think about the Saints defense and how they can match up against the Bears offense?
I want to see how this Bears offensive line plays against better defensive fronts. So you're going to see that this Sunday with the Saints. As you mentioned, Cameron Jordan, going back to the regular season matchup, he had one sack against Nick Foles, but the Bears held him pretty much in check. Of course, we all know that the Bears offensive line has had issues injury-wise all season long. This group of no-name guys have been playing great for the last month. Let's give them credit for that. I wanted to see if they're going to double-team Cameron Jordan or whether they just play schematically on him. Now, as far as the secondary is concerned for the Saints, it's led by C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Of course, he likes to talk trash. Go ask Javon Wims and Allen Robinson the last couple years that the Saints beating the Bears here in Chicago. During those games, of course, LaShawn Lattimore, he takes chances on the ball on the defensive back spot. Of course, Malcolm Jenkins is a veteran. He's won the Super Bowl a couple years ago with the Eagles. So this Saints secondary, Even though it may not be sexy to some people, they can make plays and they are very physical. So they're going to give the Bears receivers all they can handle.
And we'll see how Trubisky does against a more competent, defense here, because we've seen him against, the not the weak and subpar defenses, but I want to see him see how he does this against a pretty good defense. I mean, they're not like top 5, but they're definitely in the top 10 overall, and I think that this is going to be the big test for them, and also too, I mean, Latavius Murray will also be a factor here in the running back.
He had a big game against the Bears last year in that blowout. That was when Teddy Bridgewater was with them.
Yeah, he did. So,
and of course, Hakeem Hicks was missing for the Bears too. That kept entering my mind this week.
Yeah, exactly. So he could be a factor too. I'm sure they're going to switch Kamara around and such like that. So he too might be a factor. So you remember he actually played very well, for a couple of years when he was at Minnesota. So he actually likes playing the Bears defense. So because he actually can kind of he can maneuver, he can go straight up the gut and all that. So. He definitely will be a factor there for the Saints offense. So like I said, we'll talk more about that Ross in a little bit, but to finish up our Bears preview, what do you think? Who do you trust more? Do you trust? I'll give you some choice. Do you trust the Bears offense or the Saints defense? And the second for it, do you trust the Bears defense or the Saints offense?
I will trust more of the Saints offense, and I just trust the Saints more all around. Yes, give the Bears credit, especially offensively, the last month of the season. Matt Nagy has actually committed to running the football, and David Montgomery has shown that he can put up better stats when you give him more opportunities to carry the ball. But as of right now, I trust the Saints more because of their experience, and they have a better talent all up and down their roster. So I trust the Saints a little bit more. Like you mentioned, we'll get into our picks later, but going into this game, it favors the Saints on paper. But it's any given Sunday, especially during this year of 2020, anything can happen.
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. Like I said about the wild card, the various upsets that's came out since the playoffs haven't expanded. We've seen at least one. There've been at least one game where I think really that happened. So, like I said, will this be the game? Maybe, maybe not. But I just think I just don't think that's going to happen. Like I said, we'll do our picks in a little bit. The aspect of this before we go into the rest of the wild card games, it's also not only going to be on CBS, but it's also going to be simulcast on Nickelodeon. Noah Eagle, if the last name sounds familiar, yes, he is the son of the great Ian Eagle. Noah went through Syracuse like his dad did, and he's actually been. I believe he does Clippers games. If I'm not mistaken, I think so. Now he's going to be doing a game with, I think, a couple of stars from the new All That. I don't have their names, but I think he's going to be doing the games with them, and I think someone else is going to be doing the silent reporting. This is actually a cool initiative that they're doing because, CBS and Nickelodeon are broadcast mates because, the CBS Viacom, the Viacom merger. So I actually like what they're doing because, the participation in youth football has down a little bit in recent years. So people are, the CBS people feel that maybe using this as an opportunity, seeing, showing that, that look, football's fun. I think they're going to do like animation and stuff like that. They might have slime involved. I think the way they're doing
Double Dare, yes.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Back in the day, I mean, look, we were, I was, talking to our good friend Layla Rahimi, and we were kind of, because we're all the same age, we're kind of reminiscing. We were reminiscing about some of the various shows that came on. Like 80s and 90s, Nickelodeon was the best.
Yes.
And I'm sure. Look, I'm sure you agree, Sid. I mean, look, Legends of the Hidden
Temple. Double Dare, Wild and Crazy Kids, the original version of all that. Yes.
Legends of the Hidden Temple. I mean, oh my God, I wanted to be on that show so bad back in the day. Oh my God, that show was awesome. Salute Your Shorts was a really good comedy. And hey, dude, I mean, look, some of the other, we can go on and on about it, but we won't. But what do you think about what they're doing, what CBS and Viacom, what they're doing here?
Yeah, it's all about getting out that content, refreshing the content for a new generation, for a different audience. We all know the NFL is king right now in the sports world, especially in these United States. And also Nate Burleson from the NFL Today on CBS will be part of the call as well. So anything to boost those ratings, to help put out content and generate a revenue, of course, and generate a new audience, why not?
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think if you look at, Nick Jr. I'm sure. I'm sure if you got young kids, I'm sure you'll see the Paw Patrol gang. I'm sure. I don't know if Dora the Explorer is still prevalent, on Nick Jr., but I'm sure you'll see some of the appearances from some of their characters too. So I like what they're doing. I mean, look, you got Noah Eagle and Nate Burleson, going to be doing the games, calling the game, and I'm sure they're going to be some of the Nickelodeon stars will probably be doing some various appearances. So this is pretty cool for the kids. And I heard some parents say, well, our kids don't watch Nickelodeon as much as they used to, but this could be like a nice little thing to kind of boost those ratings up among the younger kids.
Yeah, it's interesting to see what those ratings are going to be when they come out on Monday.
Yeah, absolutely. Should be interesting. Something to look out for too. So let's talk about the rest of the wild card slate. We'll start with tomorrow's games. The first one up, you got
Saturday.
Yes, the early Saturday noon slate. Here you got Indy and Buffalo.
Coming into this game, the Bills have the number 2 seed, while the Colts are back then with the number 7 seed in the wild card. I think it's going to come down to the running games for both of these teams. Starting off with the Colts, of course, Marlon Mack was injured in the first game of the year at Jacksonville, but rookie Jonathan Taylor has picked it up, especially in the last couple of weeks. He finished the year with 11 touchdown runs and over 1,160 yards of rushing. Of course, on the other side for the Bills, you have Devin Singletary as your primary running back. But I think also, too, is going to come down to, will the Colts' young defense create a couple of turnovers? Because if they can, it's a possibility they can pull off an upset. Of course, my guy, Darius Leonard from the Colts, he's right there in middle linebacker for the Colts. And also they have a couple of guys on their defensive line as well. DeForest Buckner is there as well. And he can pressure the quarterback. But it's going to come down to, for the Colts, can they create multiple turnovers? If they can, they're going to give themselves a shot. On the flip side for the Colts offense, Phillip Rivers, he better not turn that football over, because if he does, it's going to be a long day for him. On the other side for Buffalo, can you still keep your foot on the pedal, especially offensively, because Josh Allen is playing the best football of his career. He has the number 1 wide receiver now in Stephon Diggs. If those two get to clicking, especially early, it's going to be a long day for the Colts.
I've been praising the Colts defense most of this season, so
yeah.
I think that this will definitely going to be a tough matchup for them. With Josh Allen playing as great as he's been playing, and plus it's going to be a little bit of a crowd there at the Bills Stadium. I think they're saying I think Governor Cuomo said there's going to be about 7,000 people there, I believe. So I'm sure it's going to be mostly essential workers from the Buffalo area. So they're going to have a crowd factor. Maybe not as loud as it would usually be, but there's going to be a crowd factor. And like you said, I mean, Phillip Rivers can't make any mistakes. Because it's going to be a long day for him, and not like Josh Allen. I mean, that Colts defense is actually one of the top defenses in the league. We talked about DeForest Buckner and also Darius Leonard too. So it's going to be very interesting to see how those matchups lie. I think the key is going to be, don't make any mistakes and try not to go too far ahead. I know, I'm sure Bills fans are saying, look, we want KC in a couple of weeks, but I think people need to kind of slow down and take it one step at a time.
Yeah, and also too, I think it's ball control is going to be more important for Indianapolis, because, as we mentioned, the Buffalo defense is on fire right now. They could score in just about any time as well. So for the Colts, if you had Coach Frank Wright, do you want to play the ball control game? Because if you do, that's going to keep the Bills' offense off the field.
Absolutely, and and I'm sure look, Frank Wright knows how to do it. He knows how to make playoff performances against in overall, he played for the Bills, of course, with that great comeback against Houston years and years ago. But yeah, this should be a fun one, and we'll see if the Bills are going to be dancing MC Hammer to a win tomorrow. Well, look, I gotta say though, I commend those guys, because most of them probably weren't even born when that song came out. I mean,
no.
They were getting down. Look, Josh Allen, he's getting into it. The Stephon Diggs. I don't know if they do that at the club. Well, I'm sure there are no clubs open in Buffalo right now, but they be getting all the big guys are getting down too. So we'll see if they'll be dancing on tomorrow. Should be a fun
that old school music you cannot bury. You cannot bury it. It always comes back.
Oh no, not at all. We should know. We should know.
Exactly.
All right. Okay, let's the next matchup. This will be the third matchup for these two teams because they're division mates in the NFC West. You got the Rams and the Seahawks. I love that Sean McVay is playing it very close to the vest on as to as who will be playing quarterback. Apparently Jared Goff, even though he had his thumb surgery, actually did practice it but was limited. John Wolford had a really actually had a pretty good game against the Arizona Cardinals to sort of solidify that playoff spot for them. As for the Seahawks, I mean, they've been playing better the last 2 weeks. Their defense is playing better. It looks like Jamal Adams will be able to play because there was some concern that he wouldn't be able to. Mm-hmm. What do you think about this one? This should be an interesting one here, especially since these two are from the same division.
The key matchup for me for this game is cornerback Jalen Ramsey for the Rams going up against DK Metcalf, the wide receiver for the Seattle Seahawks. Of course, DK Metcalf is one of the best young wide receivers in the league. He finished the year with 83 catches for 1,300 yards and 10 total touchdowns. And Jalen Ramsey, we all know he can get in with the best of them and get in people's heads. So I'm looking forward to that matchup. But two things is going to come down to this game. First, the running back position, Darrell Henderson for the Rams, and also Cam Akers. Of course, Cam Akers did just enough against Arizona last week in their regular season finale to clinch that playoff spot and finish that record with 10-6. Of course, Henderson was out. I don't know if he's going to play this weekend or not. And also, too, for the Rams, assuming that Jared Goff will start, we all know that if the game comes down to him, he cannot do it. You saw that a couple of years ago when Todd Gurley was injured. Put the ball in Jared Goff's hands, he just cannot do it. He's not that type of quarterback. If he plays on Saturday, assuming that the Seahawks defense led by L.J. Collier and Bobby Wagner and some of those other veterans, if they can shut down the Rams' running game, put that ball in Jared Goff's hands, because if Jared Goff has the ball in his hands and you force him to throw it deep, he cannot do it, especially now with that injured thumb. Now, if John Wolford's in there, it was easy for him to run around last week against the Arizona Cardinals, okay? And, yes, it's going to be challenging to that Seahawks front seven, but John Wolford doesn't impress me if he plays on Saturday. So I assume that Goff is going to play. If you shut down that running game, it's going to be a long day for the Rams. Even though the Rams had the defense, we'll talk about it in just a moment. But that Rams offense doesn't impress me that much without a running game.
Yeah. They were able to get away with it early on, but, as it went on in the season, it really didn't. Oh, sorry. I thought I echo for a second. It really didn't plaster around too much for that. So, like you said, Akers, has kind of slowed down a little bit. So we'll see what they do here. And I think also too, same thing with the Seahawks. I mean, we'll see how Chris Carson does, and Carl's Hyde's been banged up, so we'll see if he'll be able to play. That old line for the Seahawks have been concerning me for years. I'm a little concerned about them now. We'll see if Tyler Lockett. We'll see if he can be a factor. Like you said, you mentioned Metcalf and Ramsey. That's probably going to be a very good. That should be a very fun matchup for those of you who want to see. That should be a lot of fun. Contre Diggs, for the receiving core, matchup against the receiving core for the Rams. That's going to be interesting too. Jamal Adams, apparently he's back to be 100%. There was, like I said, there was some concern about whether or not he'll play. It was like he's assured everybody he will be able to play. This is his first playoff game. He's not going to miss this. So this will be a very entertaining one. And as far as Goff, I mean, look, if his thumb's not 100%, and if you don't at least have establish a running game, if you're the Rams, especially if his thumb's not, Goff's thumb's not it's gonna be a big issue. Cooper Kupp's back, which is that's huge for Goff, and all Robert Woods as well. But if they can't sustain that offense, it's gonna be a long day for them.
And also too, going back to that Seahawks offensive line, will they double team Aaron Donald, or will they just have some schematic schemes for him? Because that's going to be interesting, because Aaron Donald is a beast, and he can knock over one guy with just one big arm swing. And if he starts to do that with the offensive line, it's going to be a long day for Russell Wilson and crew. And also, too, keep your eye on Leonard Floyd, the former Bear, now in part of the linebacking core for the Rams.
Yeah, it seems like he actually has renewed his career, if you will. It didn't work
Yeah,
out here in
yeah.
Chicago, but he went to the
I think he finished out with 9 sacks for the year.
yeah, he did. But yeah, so look, I mean, look, you're happy for Leonard Floyd and what he's done. So who do you trust? Do you trust the Seahawks defense or the Rams defense? I mean, it's definitely
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely a toss up here. Of course, we've got Aaron Donald, Leonard Floyd, of course, Jalen Ramsey. We'll see how he does against Metcalf. That should be a fun one, like you've been saying. So this should be a really fun. I think this will probably be the most entertaining game because these teams know each other so well since they're division mates, division rivals, I should say. So this should be a very fun one up in Seattle, and they don't have to worry about the crowd either. The Rams do. The Rams don't. So that should help.
Yeah.
All right, the nightcap of the Saturday slate, you got Tampa Bay and Washington. Chase Young from Washington, he's been saying he wants Tom Brady. Well, look, we know how Tom Brady does in a wild card games. He does tend to struggle when he has to play in the opening playoff week. So where do you see this matchup?
One, NBC is pissed, excuse my language, because they don't get to showcase New York City and force it down our throats. Thank you to the New York Giants not taking care of business, and Philadelphia doing what they did last Sunday night, but that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother time. But America's going to get a good matchup. The Washington football team win the NFC East with a 7-9 record. Of course, we're all familiar with this person's name here in Chicago, Ron Rivera, 85 Bear, great NFL career, great NFL assistant coach, now head coach, has Super Bowl experience, taking the 2015 Carolina Panthers team to the Super Bowl before losing. But he's established a new culture there in Washington. Alex Smith, great story. He came back early this year. It looks like he's healthy enough to play on Saturday. So I want to see what Washington does because Tampa Bay's defense is not as bad as people want to make it out to be. But I want to see them establish the running game with Antonio Gibson. He's had a nice year. And let's see if they could get any big plays from their big-time wide receivers like Terry McLaurin, even though he only had 4 touchdowns for the entire season. I want to see him, if he can come up big in his first playoff matchup, his first playoff game, I should say, for Washington.
Yeah, the Washington's are interesting because it looks like they may. I think Ron Rivera kind of mentioned that he may have to do the 2 quarterback thing with Alex Smith and Tanner Heineke. So that's gonna be interesting in and of itself. Like you said, Terry McLaurin and Antonio Gibson, they may Gibson he might have to carry the load. I think, especially if you're gonna do the 2 quarterback thing. Logan Thomas, remember he played quarterback when he was at Virginia Tech, so don't be surprised if he is sort of used in that aspect of it. So that'll be interesting there in that sense. Chase Young, look, he's probably one of the best rookie, rookie defensive guys in the league. The man's just a beast. We've known this for years now when he was at Ohio State. Ronald Darby is another one that that can make big plays. Kendall Fuller, who is Kyle's younger brother, I think he makes big plays too. John Bostic as well has been really solid this season too, former Bear as well. So, and as for the Bucks, I mean, I think their defense is going to be sort of the thing for them. I'm not, like I said, this isn't Tom Brady's first career. I know he's older now and he's 43, but look, if he it will be interesting if Mike Evans will be able to play. There's actually no indication whether he is. Ronald Jones, Leonard Fournette, they may have to sort of like chug it, especially if we'll see if Antonio Brown and of course Gronk, what they do. But I think for me, it's going to be the Bucs defense. If Antoine Winfield Jr., as a rookie, if he can step up. Jordan White has another name that kind of needs to step a little bit on defense. You, of course, you got Jason Pierre-Paul, Levante David. I mean, the names are there. I just think that we need to sort of see them more because for a lot of these guys, this is going to be their first playoff experience. So it's going to be, will the nerves get to some of the younger guys? That's what I'm worried about if you're a Bucs fan.
And that's a very good point, Lakina. The nerves get into some of those young guys because you need to have those key veterans around to tell them what to expect and how to handle pressure situations, especially in their playoff game. Which brings me up to Tom Brady. Of course, like you mentioned, during his career, when he plays on Wild Card Weekend, he does not have a great game. Can we reference to last year against the Tennessee Titans, his last game in the Patriots uniform? Can we reference to 2009 against the Baltimore Ravens and Ray Rice before his troubles? So we can go all down the line there. But for Tom Brady, can he limit his mistakes? I know he finished the year with 40 touchdown passes. I know it didn't look like it at times, folks, but he did finish the year with 40 touchdown passes. But can Brady not turn the ball over? And the running game for the Buccaneers is going to be key too, especially if Mike Evans does not play. Leonard Fournette, it's time for him to grow up. Ronald Jones, I think this will be his first playoff game. I want to see what he does there as well. Can that offensive line protect Tom Brady? Because as we mentioned, that Washington football team defensive line is the best in the league. They're young, they're hungry, and they're going to come after Brady on Saturday night.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is gonna be a very fun one here, and I think, like I said, it's gonna be interesting to see like which part of which part of both teams will show up. Because like I said,
and also too, for that Buccaneers offense, will Antonio Brown show up? Because he's shown up these last 3 games for the Buccaneers, scoring a touchdown in each of the last 3 games, I believe. So let's see if he can keep his head on straight.
Absolutely, that's good. That's gonna be a fun. This will be definitely a fun one here down in the DC area. This should be a fun one. Also, let's go to the Sunday wild card games. You got Baltimore and Tennessee, a rematch of last year's divisional playoff, where we all know what happened, and I'm sure that Baltimore wants to exercise those playoff demons, if you will. And everyone said that the Baltimore is probably the most dangerous team, but we've seen that the Titans can be pretty dangerous too. So this should be a fun one here. Where do you see this game?
It's going to come down to the running game for both teams. First, for Baltimore quarterback Lamar Jackson, can he not turn the ball over like he did a year ago? And also, too, my guy, rookie running back Dobbins.
J.K. Dobbins.
J.K. Dobbins, thank you. J.K. Dobbins, this will be his first playoff game. Can he hold on to the rock and pile up the yards? We all know that Tennessee Titans defense is not as good as people think. It's not as bad as people think, but it's not as good rankings-wise. So I want to see if the Titans defense can create a couple turnovers. If they can, like they did in last year's playoffs, like they did early in the season when they beat the Ravens in Baltimore, they'll have a bigger edge over Baltimore. Coming to this game, they won their last 2 games against the Ravens, so they have an edge right there. But Baltimore is just not turning the ball over. We all know that on the defensive side of the ball for Baltimore, their secondary is pretty good, led by Marcus Peters, but can they pressure Ryan Tannehill and force a couple of turnovers? And can they shut down Derrick Henry? If they do those 2 things, they'll win.
I think having Calais Campbell there, I think that helps a little bit too, and perhaps having to slow down Derrick Henry, which is what they're going to have to do. Because remember, he didn't play in the regular season meeting earlier, earlier this season. Pernell McPhee has had a good year as well, former Bear.
He's still playing?
Yes, I know, right? I mean, yeah, we haven't heard from him in a minute, but he's actually been pretty productive.
He's getting them checks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like I said, Marcus Peters is probably going to be, he's probably going to have to force some turnovers. He's going to be up against Antonio. I forgot that the kid from the Titans. I forgot his name for a second. We're both having brain farts today, but look, I mean, I think the defense is going to be a factor. Look, we had Kayla Anderson on when the Titans played the Bears, and look, we've said that Titans defense, again, not flashy, rankings wise, they're not the best, but look, they're opportunistic when when they get it, and I think that they're going to try it again because they were able to do it in their first meeting with the Ravens, the regular season meeting, I should say. Malcolm Butler's still around. We'll see if Adoree Jackson will be able to play this weekend. Desmond Kane too. So this is going to be one of those things where, look, it's hard to beat a team 3 times in a row, especially within the last year. And it's hard to be a team twice in the NFL, especially if it's an interdivisional or interdivisional matchup. So like I said, we'll hold on for our picks, but I'm expecting something different here. I don't know why, but you got Peters going up against AJ Brown. But he's been banged up too, so. Could be very interesting, though, in this matchup.
Yeah, it should be, as you will say, looking at those 9-6 games. Maybe it's a 17-10 game when it's all said and done.
Probably. I mean, like I said, it's going to, it doesn't like weather. I'm looking at the weather forecast for Nashville. It doesn't like weather won't be an issue. So, that's a good, that kind of evens things out. So, should be.
Watch that game. We'll probably have both of them scoring in the 30s.
Probably, yeah. That might happen, too. It might be 35-30 or something like that. Who knows? another team that's gonna be playing each other again, and they just played last week because they're division mates. The Browns and the Steelers. The Browns making their first playoff appearances 0-2. Big Ben will play, and so will the other starters who did not play in last week's game. Where do you see this?
If you're Pittsburgh, throw last week's game tape out the window because you know that this Cleveland team is going to be a different team. Plus, the team that you fielded out there last week, is not going to be the same team come Sunday night. Ben Roethlisberger, you do not want the game to come into his hands, especially given his age and at the stage of his career. He's older. He can't run around like he did when he was in his 20s. That means you're going to have to run the football with James Conner and Benny Snell Jr. like they did early in the season. Mm-hmm. Now, on the other side of the ball, Pittsburgh's defense, especially without Dupree now, who got injured a few weeks ago, now he's out for the year. How are you going to pressure Baker Mayfield? If you could force a couple of turnovers on him, if you could stop that running game with Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt, that will give you a great chance to win. For some reason, Pittsburgh's defense, I think they're going to struggle in this game. Now, they may come out with a win, but it's going to be some challenging spots during this game where they need to make a play. Will they be able to make those plays?
And that's going to be the thing, right? I mean, look, as soon as Dupree was hurt and he was gone for the year, they started giving up a lot of points, that defense. Mm-hmm. We saw what happened. They had to come back against Indy. They had a couple other games where they gave up a lot of points, those last few games of the season. So I think this is going to be the sort of like the thing here. Now, what will happen? And I'm kind of a little concerned. I think Steelers fans should be a little bit concerned about their defense. I mean, this could be like one of those, 30, maybe not 30, but maybe like 20 in the 20s, maybe 27, 24 or something like that. I think the Steelers will do just enough to win, especially since with all the COVID issues going on here, they're probably not going to have, Kevin Stefanski. The Browns probably won't have him a lot. They haven't even been able to practice because of COVID issues there. So you wonder, will that play a role in this? And I know they've said that they're not going to reschedule the game because they're in a tight scheduling here, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Steelers use that to their advantage, the fact that the Browns haven't been able to practice.
Yeah, since you brought that up, Lakina, pay attention to the first two offensive series of the game for the Cleveland Browns. If they cannot muster up anything, it's going to be a long day for them because even though all teams have done practice and meetings virtually at some points during the season, we have not had the opportunity to practice physically on the field, especially for an entire week. It's going to cause problems. Yeah,
absolutely. We saw with some of the various teams. I mean, we all saw when Tennessee when they had their issues early in the season. Baltimore, they were able to kind of soldier, push on through, even though they had their issues, about a couple months ago. So it's sort of a very interesting, task here because I feel like, especially in the playoffs. I mean, it's going to be a lot of excitement, in Cleveland. But then this happens. I mean, not being able to practice, actually physically practice. I mean, I know Alvin Kamara's been doing it, through Zoom and stuff the last couple of days for the Saints. But when a whole team hasn't been able to practice, then you have problems. I mean, you already had like Jarvis Landry and the wide receiving core, having various issues. It looks like they'll be back, but it's going to be sort of weird. And I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see more of this as we get closer and closer to the Super Bowl. That especially with numbers going up across the country, still up in a lot of states, especially here in Illinois, we might be seeing some teams that might have issues.
Yeah, if you're the NFL, like you powered your way through this season, of course you can give the NFL a hand to a certain extent because they did not have to cancel any games. They didn't want to reshuffle any games either, but take the two situations. You would rather reshuffle games instead of canceling games and giving that money back to the networks and then your players not get paid. But with that being said, like you said, it could cause some issues down the line if you're NFL. You hope not, because you really don't want to reschedule these playoff games. But since it's where the biggest money is being made for the postseason, the NFL is going to do everything they can within their power to finish these playoff games, whether it takes another week or two or a month or two, those games will be completed. I guarantee you that.
Absolutely. Oh, look, I mean, we already know that they've already come sure they probably got plans in place to sort of try to see what happens, and I'm sure there's going to be like plan B, C, and D. I mean, I just don't see them. Look, they were able to get through the season, pretty much unscathed. I mean, yes, they've had to move some games around and play a game on a Wednesday, but which actually rated pretty well. But I don't think they want to go through that again. So, if you're in the NFL, you're hoping that you don't have to do that, especially since this is your big moneymaker, like you said.
Yeah.
All right. The all pros were announced earlier this morning. Cordell Patterson made the All-Pro as a kick returner, of course, for the Bears. It looks like, Travis Kelce for the Chiefs, and also Aaron Donald were both unanimous All-Pro selection teams. Some of the other names: Derrick Henry, Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, David Bacham, Jack Conlon, that's the O-line guys, Quentin Nelson for the Colts, Brandon Scherf for Washington, and Corey Lindsey, another one of, Rodgers' top O-line guys. On the defensive side, TJ Watt, I should say, for the Steelers. Also Myles Garrett for the Browns, Aaron Donald, we mentioned him earlier, DeForest Buckner, Fred Warner for the 49ers, Bobby Wagner for the Seahawks. He might be a factor too in that game with the Rams this weekend as well. Darius Leonard, Davian Howard, Jalen Ramsey, Tyrann Mathieu, Micah Fitzpatrick, and Bubba Baker for the Cardinals. And joining Patterson for the special teams, Jason Sanders, Jake Bailey, Gunnar Olszewski for the Patriots. Some good news for the Patriots there. George Odom and Morgan Cox. Those are your all pros.
Not a surprise there. Maybe Josh Allen not getting on that list, but you have had other better quarterbacks that played well throughout the season. So maybe that'll be my only gripe, using air quotes for those listening exclusively on the podcast, using air quotes for gripe. But other than that, those are the usual names you expect to see on that list.
Yeah, look, I don't really have no gripes here. Look, who would you take out, especially if you add names? And I know people are going to say Roquan. I think Roquan even tweeted that maybe he should have been in there. But who do you take out among the names I've mentioned? It's hard. There's only so many spots in the All-Pro team. But what can you do? Okay, so we're going to take a quick break. We're going to have Ross Jackson from the Locked On Saints podcast to help us preview Saints and Bears and the rest of the wild card slate. Also, so a big trade that actually in baseball that actually helps Sid's White Sox. We'll tell you about that. Also, we'll talk a little bit of a little national championship game if we have time. And also, college hoops. Also the Bulls too. Bulls actually are having a pretty good West Coast trip so far. So we'll be right back with more Second City Sports Zoom style, and we'll be right back.
All right, Lakina, I'm ready. Welcome back to the second half of the weekend edition of Second City Sports Zoom Style.
Zoom Style.
Zoom Style. I'm going to just jump in.
I love it.
We love it. We love it.
I love it. We love it.
Along with Lakina McGee, I'm Sydney Brown. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, that's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You can follow me at Keena McGee on Twitter and at Keena_McGee on the IG.
You can go to our website at realregalradio.com. That's WEAREREGAL radio.com. And you can catch this podcast, Second City Sports, along with our other podcast programming from War Media by simply searching for War on Anchor wherever you download your podcast, including that iHeartRadio app. Make sure you type in that search engine box, War on Anchor. That's WARR on Anchor. And we're also on YouTube at War Media. Once again, at WARR Media. You can not only listen to us, but watch us. Look alive.
And don't forget to like and subscribe and get those likes up.
Yes, and continue with our discussion previewing the NFL NFC wildcard matchup between the New Orleans Saints hosting our Chicago Bears. Is friend of the show, Mr. Ross Jackson. He's the host of the Locked On Saints podcast. You can download that podcast wherever you download your podcast. And you can catch him on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Once again, at Ross Jackson. That's with two S's, Jackson at NOLA. Ross, welcome back to the program. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing just fine. I appreciate y'all having me back. Had such a blast chatting with y'all last year. So glad to be able to come back through. I appreciate you. Happy New Year to you. Hope y'all are doing well.
Back at you.
Yes, we're doing just fine. So for this wild card matchup, it's not just America's game of the week, but it's also going to be broadcast on Nickelodeon, which we'll get to later. See, Ross remembers last year we had him on the radio show.
Oh, yeah.
But let's start off, of course, with your Saints, Ross. They win the NFC South with a 12-4 record, sweeping the season series from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, beating them by one game for the division title. Before we break down the game, Ross, what impressed you most about the New Orleans Saints this season? Of course, Michael Thomas basically didn't play the whole year. Drew Brees was hurt. Of course, Jameis Winston being, quote-unquote, demoted to the third-string quarterback. Taysom Hill got some run. This probably the first time that Sean Payton has faced adversity like this, mounting on top in a long, long time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's particularly been over the last couple of years, and I would say that has been the thing that's been most impressive so far is watching the way that head coach Sean Payton has, had to deal with everything that's been going on with him and everything that's been going on. I mean, let's not forget that all the adversity, everything started before the season even began when he became the first NFL head coach diagnosed with COVID-19. So even back to that point and having to figure out, having to be the first coach essentially to have to pioneer, hey, how do we do off-season training programs without anybody being here and everything that he had to do through that point. And then you look at all of the injuries that mounted up throughout the season with Michael Thomas and Drew Brees have played only 10 quarters together all season. There were only 52 snaps in which this team has had all four pieces, Drew Brees, Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, and Emmanuel Sanders on the field at the same time. And it hasn't happened since week 10. So it's been, and even beyond that, but it's been challenging for this team to be able to figure out how they were going to circumvent all that on the offensive side. They played several games without both of their starting corners or without either or starting corner as well over on the defensive side, as well as some injuries at all three levels there. So, this has just been what this team has done. And I think that's the thing that has impressed me the most is, first of all, the efficiency of their depth, the fact that they can come in not having really played any snaps and find ways to mesh on offense and defense. It gives you a pretty good indicator of what it's going to be like to have, the superstar players that this offense was built around. Having them come back shouldn't be too much time for rust, considering that they've been able to plug in practice squad players into those roles and still be able to continue to move forward. So I think that's the thing that's been the biggest standout for me so far for the season.
It's actually been very impressive seeing them, to play as consistently as they have, even though they've had a lot of injuries and COVID issues and stuff like that. Look what happened this past Sunday with the Panthers. I want to talk about their defense for a second, Ross. I mean, I think should Saints fans be worried? I mean, they've given up a lot of points, through in various parts of the season. So. They actually played a little bit better. Again, Panthers, that game really didn't mean too much in the end. Right. But how concerned are you about the Saints defense, I should say, and how they could play?
Yeah, I think at this point, you have to feel pretty confident in the Saints defense. I mean, they went from allowing 29.8 points, if I remember correctly, over the first 7 games of the season to over the last 9 games of the season, giving up only 15.2 per game. And right now they finish near the top there at 21.1, 21.2 points per game given up. So they're doing a pretty good job on the back end. It just depends upon what you look at this team. You can look at all the scoring totals and the yards and everything as you want, but as you're indicating, the thing that has been the biggest issue has been the variation. They've been a very good defense, but then they have these kind of up and down performances. You can look no further, you don't have to look very far back. You can look to Philadelphia, for instance, and the game that they dropped in Philly, which came down to defensive execution and everything. And so, as well as offensive execution, but particularly their lack of ability to contain in the run game was huge for them. And so I think that, but you still come into this one with some confidence. This is a team that had only 4 interceptions over the first, I think it was 7 games of the season, 9 over the next 4, 0 over the 4 after that, and then 5 on Sunday against the Carolina Panthers. And so if this is the upswing, it's a good time for it to happen.
Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Network, is joining us here on Second City Sports to preview Bears and Saints. That game will be this Sunday at 3:40 p.m. on CBS, along with Lakina McGee. I am Sidney Brown. Ross, let's focus in on that Saints offense. Go back to the regular season matchup between the Bears and Saints. The Saints got out of there alive with a 26-23 victory in overtime. I remember that game. Alvin Kamara was not effective in the running game, but head coach Sean Payton used him in the passing game, which he was effective. Almost got 100 yards, if memory serves correct.
Yep.
Now, Nick Foles was the quarterback on the other side for the Bears, but we'll get to that later. But I want to ask you, will head coach Sean Payton look at that game film and use that same game plan again? Or do you think that he's going to mix it up and see if he can establish Kamara in the running game first, especially given Kamara's performance on Christmas Day against the Vikings with those 6 touchdown runs?
Yeah, he had a big day on Christmas. That was a nice little Christmas present for everybody in New Orleans for sure. I really think – okay, so here's the way that I would phrase it. I think that you'll see a lot of the split zone run type situations that they usually try to generate in terms of trying to create some – air to run up the B gap, for instance, on the backside of plays and everything. They'll do all of that. But the biggest factor is going to be for them, how can they get Alvin Kamara involved in the passing game, especially with Michael Thomas also back, who's going to draw a lot of attention in the passing game, or the expectation is that Michael Thomas will be back. And if he hits the field, then that's going to draw a lot of attention in the passing game. The thing that Chicago does so incredibly well is that every single defensive snap, when it's a single high safety or a split safety look, it looks the exact same. And then post snap, they'll vary. So they do a very good job at disguising. So what that means is that the Saints in the passing game are going to need to be able to see the same thing on the field at the same time mid-play. That's why Michael Thomas is important. That's why Alvin Kamara and his option routes are important. Is he going to run an arrow route, wheel route, or dump off to the flats, those type of situations to where he and Drew Brees can see the same thing. So I think that they'll continue to lean on that, especially if Roquan Smith isn't able to go. I know that he's been injured and hasn't practiced yet Wednesday or Thursday. And so if he's out, then that opens up a lot of opportunities for the Saints in the passing game in particular. I think they'll work on establishing the run game, but I think the main focus for Alvin Kamara is going to be how he can contribute through the air. How
much do you think they're going to use Taysom Hill? Because we saw him a little bit, during the previous meeting against the Bears earlier this season. Is Payton going to use him more, or sort of about the same, or they're going to try to maybe use a little bit less?
Yeah, the thing that makes Taysom Hill so interesting now is that he started 4 games at quarterback. So there's less of an indicator if you see him in the backfield in the shotgun with a running back on his hip that he's going to run, right? There's less ability to expect that. There's a lot of pre-snap motion and things like that can indicate it, don't get me wrong. But you can also line him up under center and run the play action game with him and take advantage of some eye discipline issues on the back end for Chicago and things like that. And so wherever they can generate opportunities for Taysom Hill, he'll certainly get them. You can expect to see him on 3rd and short situations. You can certainly expect to see him in the red zone. He did leave Sunday's game against Carolina Panthers with a concussion. He went back to full practice on Thursday, so I would keep an eye out and see exactly what he's going to look like for that game. I wouldn't be surprised to see, maybe a game time decision for him or anything like that, even regardless of what the game status designation is before that. But just in terms of his usage might be limited based upon his injury and based upon some of the other pieces around. So I would keep an eye out for all of that. But when it comes down to Taysom Hill, the fact of the matter is that when there's an opportunity for Sean Payton to put him on the field, he's going to put Taysom Hill on the field. There's absolutely no doubt about that for sure.
Ross, let's focus in on the New Orleans Saints secondary led by C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Marshawn Lattimore, Malcolm Jenkins, the veteran, and Janoris Jenkins. We all know that this group has given the Bears problems the last couple years in Chicago with the last 2 regular season games. Of course, thank you, Javon Wilson, for doing something stupid and cost you yourself a couple of games. But they're also giving Allen Robinson problems as well. Of course, we all saw what the Packers did to him last week. Of course, Allen Robinson has been limited this week in practice due to a hamstring injury. But how important is that Saints defense, Saints secondary? How important is that group going to be to perhaps try to take the ball away, to limit those wide receivers for the Bears, first of all, especially if Robinson plays, if Darnell Mooney plays. And number 2, trying to confuse Mitchell Trubisky at the line because we all know Nick Foles, when he played early in the season, he didn't have the greatest game. I think things are going to be different for Trubisky, but I think it's going to come down to how can Trubisky will the coverage fool him this time, because it's going to be different with him under center than when Nick Foles was under center early in the season.
Yeah, they're certainly going to give him a lot of looks that he'll have to try to diagnose pre-snap, and then they'll change things around. So they'll take a piece out of the Chicago defense playbook for sure, in terms of making sure that they're able to try to vary up what those looks are after the snap and what Trubisky has to decide throughout the snap. The thing that the Bears will probably do to help with that is that they'll run some play actions and some boot actions off of outside zones, which is going to give a lot of time to Trubisky in terms of moving the pocket and things like that, and give him an opportunity to read the field and see. So he'll have a little bit more processing time to his advantage than maybe Drew Brees, who's going to be more traditional pocket passer, will. And they don't run a ton of play action with Drew, although since he took back over for Taysom Hill, it was as if he was reminded, hey, play action is actually a pretty good idea. Let's use that more. And they started incorporating it a bit more for him. But for the Saints secondary, and particularly Marcus Williams, whose health is going to be a big question coming into this game too, just in terms of what he's going to look like on the field after the lower leg injury that he had, or the low ankle sprain that he had a couple games ago. That's going to be big for this team in terms of what they're going to be able to do over on the back end. The fact of the matter is that they're probably going to play a lot of cover 2 man. They're certainly going to man up and challenge these receivers to beat them off the line of scrimmage. Marshawn Lattimore has really stepped his game up since he faced Allen Robinson last time, because he didn't have a great game against Allen Robinson the last time. Allen Robinson cooked him a few times on double moves and, faking to the outside before some in-breaking routes, things like that. So I expect he and Janoris Jenkins to be a lot more physical at the line of scrimmage. If Darnell Mooney's available, then I think that those deep shots are going to be there for them, and because Darnell Mooney's going to create them. So I know that this is now an offense with Mitch Trubisky that likes to operate within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, and the Saints defense will certainly welcome that, but they have to be careful about some of those inherent built-in deep shots that are going to be built in. That's where the back end secondary becomes really, really important. So I expect them to play a lot of that 2-man under, 2-man, cover 2 man looks, and challenge these receivers to essentially find their way open downfield, but then give them the short and intermediate game all day long.
What about their front 7 with Cam Jordan and Demario Davis and guys like that? And I'm sure they're going to want to try and slow down David Montgomery, because I'm sure that the Bears are going to use the run game more to keep their offense, the Saints offense, off the field. So yes. Are they going to be using the front 7 more?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to see they're going to do their best to generate pressure with the down 4 in particular. And David Montgomery, the places that he is most comfortable running, or at least the places he's been most productive, are outside zones to the left side, offensive left, and then right up the middle behind the center. So that's going to be, David Onyemata's world right there. And David Onyemata's been playing really well, defensive tackle for the Saints, in terms of keeping anything from going on up the middle. The issue is going to be, can the Saints maintain containment on the outside, and can they generate pass rush with just their 4 down linemen? I think on 3rd down, you'll see the Saints blitz. They usually go into a 3-down set in that case, but then they'll load the line of scrimmage with 2 more linebackers and 2 more safeties, so you don't know necessarily where the pressure is coming from. So you'll see them do that quite a bit, particularly on 3rd down, and in any up-tempo opportunities for Chicago. But for the most part, it's going to be about them limiting that run game, which is going to help them in that boot action and play action area where Mitch Trubisky is really, really comfortable, but then also trying to generate pass rush while dropping, 7 more back for coverage.
Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast, is joining us here on Second City Sports Weekend Edition, along with LaKinda McGee. I am Sidney Brown as we preview Bears Saints coming up this Sunday at 3:40 p.m. down in the Bayou. Ross, let's go back to that Saints offense. You brought up Michael Thomas earlier, the stud wide receiver. Of course, he's one of the top 5 receivers in the game. Who else should Bears fans pay attention to as far as the New Orleans Saints wide receiver corps? Because looking down at the final stats from that roster, it's a bunch of quote-unquote nobodies, no disrespect, but a bunch of nobodies, right. no names, but they just keep coming up and making big plays.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Emmanuel Sanders is obviously one of those folks. He will be able to benefit in some of those crossing patterns and some of those combo patterns that are each coming from opposite sides. If there's a lot of attention going to Michael Thomas, that could open up some more opportunities for Emmanuel Sanders, who's really gotten in a groove with Drew Brees since Drew Brees' return against the Kansas City Chiefs. So I'd watch out for him. And then I'd also mention Marquez Callaway, who is somebody that has stepped up. He's got the dreads, number 12, can't miss him on the field. He's a big guy. He'll be out there, and he is somebody that has filled in places place of Michael Thomas, who's filled in place of Emmanuel Sanders. He has been this just outstanding diamond in the rough, undrafted free agent that the Saints have found. And, the Saints tend to do this pretty often, particularly at the wide receiver position. Lance Moore, Willie Snead, those guys in the past. I really believe that Marquez Callaway is that next guy, so I would keep an eye out for him as well. And he'll factor in a couple different ways, but ideally he'll be able to factor in the passing game. But he does a really good job as a run blocker as well.
Latavius Murray, though, how much of an X factor do you think he can be? Because he loves playing the Bears. He rushes. I think he gets near over 100 yards every time he plays the Bears from the teams he's played on. So, how much in fact do you think he's going to be, especially with Kamara still kind of easing his way back into it?
That, I think, is really the big key. I could see Latavius Murray getting more involved in scripted scenarios. So the first drive that they had, their first offensive drive of the game, their first offensive drive of the second half, any of those 2-minute drills, those are times where I could see Latavius Murray getting maybe some more looks. Obviously, in maybe those 2-minute drills, if it's not Alvin Kamara, then maybe it's Ty Montgomery because they'll want to be able to pass the ball, for instance. So I think those scripted areas, those specific shots to where Sean Payton sees something and says, I have a play for that, right? On a 3rd and 2, a 3rd and 3, those short yardage situations. I think Latavius Murray will be very much involved in all of those. The short yardage situation in particular, because Latavius Murray is 6'3" as a running back. He falls forward and gains you 2 yards. This is a big part of what he's able to do. And so I think that's where you'll see him. But I think he will play a factor even with the return of Alvin Kamara, and may even help to keep Alvin Kamara, on the sideline a little bit, since he didn't get to practice over the week, and then keeping him away from any injury concerns.
Talk to us about tight end Jared Cook, Ross. Of course, he ended up the year with 37 catches and 7 touchdowns overall, including a touchdown in the Saints victory over the Bears earlier this season. With Roquan Smith not in that lineup, I'm just getting this feeling that Jared Cook may be used in the game plan a little bit more. Talk to us about Mr. Cook and where you think that his impact will be on Sunday against the Bears.
Yeah, there's a good chance that he gets really involved. The issue is that he and Drew Brees have often not been on the same page. They have really tightened up their communication and seeing the field the same way and everything over the last 2 games, but it's a very small sample size to just say that the problem's fixed, right? So I think that one of the biggest things is going to be, is there trust there? Is that communication really on point? And if not, I would also look for the tight end Adam Troutman in the passing game, because if they don't feel comfortable with the communication that they're getting between Drew Brees and Jared Cook, Adam Troutman is somebody that has come on and has been, particularly in those 12 personnel sets where you have 2 tight ends on the field, that they've really been leaning on in the passing game. He's not getting as many targets or as many receptions as Jared Cook, of course, because Jared Cook's on the field more, but that would be something to look for. And if the Saints ever get to a point where they're feeling comfortable about just running the ball, then that would kind of inherently keep Jared Cook off the field, because they don't usually use him in the run game.
How about special teams? Because we know Sean Payton loves to kind of play around the special teams every once in a while. Do you think he'll go to this bag of tricks and special teams on Sunday?
Yeah, we haven't seen it all season, so I think the playoffs is certainly where you will see it. I think it will be, the bag of tricks portion of it is going to be when necessary, for sure, and only if necessary, because I think he's going to want to save that for when it's absolutely needed. So we'll see exactly what the situation is and if the game situation calls for it. But I'm sure if they can hold on to it for, say, a potential NFC championship usage, then they might use it then instead. We know this is a coach that's perfectly happy to do it. He's done it before in the Super Bowl, so I think that, you'll see him utilize it when it's necessary. The big thing on special teams that I would reference, though, is going to be Deontay Harris, who looks like he's on track to return. He's been, first team All-Pro returner in 2019 for the Saints. He's been dealing with some injuries all throughout, but they did the same thing with him that they did with Michael Thomas. They shut him down, put him on injured reserve 3 games before the end of the season, and then have him come back for the playoffs. So the intent is to have him come back for the playoffs. And so he would be somebody that I would look for in terms of the hidden yardage game and where the Saints end up starting off their field position. Punt coverage and kick coverage is going to be really important for the Saints, as well, as they've given up special teams touchdowns to the Bears in the past.
Last moment or two with Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast, right here on the weekend edition of Second City Sports, as we preview Bears Saints NFC wildcard matchup for Sunday at 3:40 p.m. down in the Bayou. Ross, which Saints player needs to show up on Sunday to have any chance of beating the Bears? If there's one player that you're looking forward to having a big game, who needs to have a big game, who is it and why?
I think that there's one player that could be a huge factor for them on the defensive line, and that kind of needs it for his own narrative as well, and that's Marcus Davenport. First-round pick a few years ago. They traded up to get him. He is effectively referred to as 2 firsts because they spent 2 first-round picks on him, so that's what the fan base refers to him as. He finished the season with 1.5 sacks, which is not what you want from that. Now, of course, Trey Hendrickson had 13.5, so they made up for it elsewhere. But the anticipation for Marcus Davenport was really high in terms of his development coming into his third year here. And so I think that in the playoffs, if Trey Hendrickson, is dealing with, he has a neck injury that he's dealing with, that slows him down at all or keeps him out of the game at, game time decision type situation, then Marcus Davenport is going to be relied upon. So him as a pass rusher, yes, but also him and his ability to contain in the run game are going to be very important.
Now, we talked about, Sid and I talked about earlier about the game will be simulcast on both CBS and Nickelodeon,
Yes.
network mates. Although Tony Romo was like, he's going to be calling the game from his home down in Dallas.
Right.
And Noah Eagle and Nate Burleson, I think they're going to have Nickelodeon, they're going to have like a couple of people from their new version of All That, on the sideline. They're going to have like cute little, sort of like things where, like they're gonna have animation and stuff like that. So what do you think about that? What do you think about this initiative that the CBS and Viacom, what they're trying to do here?
I love it. I'm so excited about it. I really am. And it's mostly just because I'm a big child. That's all that I really am. I'm just a big child that loves football. And I get it, right? Like they're trying to open up the NFL to, a younger fan base and try to see if this is something that can be applicable to kids. There's going to be a lot of things like superimposed and like big cartoon eyes and slime in the end zone and all these other things. And so, you have to imagine this is going to be on a major delay from the usual network so that they can superimpose all that, as well as cut past any more CJ Gardner-Johnson, Javon Wims moments should they need to, things like that. I don't think you're going to want that on Nickelodeon.
No, not at all.
And so I do. I think that it's cool. I think that it's neat. I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes. I'm probably going to be more tuned into the Nickelodeon version, if I'm being 100% honest with you, than I am going to be with the CBS version, because I'm really interested to see it. And I've never really been a fan of CBS's broadcast anyway. And so, I'll happily take my alternative, but I'll be really interested to see how this works, if it works, and then how it continues to move forward, if at all.
Yeah, don't forget it. If hopefully those folks at CBS are listening, if Trubisky throws an interception or two, don't forget to add the double dare slime. Just
yes. That might happen too.
Yeah.
Last question for me, Ross. You talk to Saints fans all the time throughout the season. I'm not going to say they're not excited. I'm sure they am, but how nervous are they really about this can possibly be Drew Brees' last dance or last run at a Super Bowl title before he joins NBC for their television football coverage soon?
Yeah. I think that this is something that most Saints fans have expected. When the report came out that this would possibly, that Sunday was possibly going to be Drew Brees' last regular season game, it kind of had a resonant duh across the that nation. But I do think that, hearing the reality of it is still a very different situation. And so if it ends up being true, I think that people are excited. I mean, I think there's nerves, of course, because when you've been fortunate enough to watch, 14, 15 years of a Hall of Fame quarterback lead the way for your favorite team, that's exciting, right? Like you want to tune in every time that this team plays. It also comes with a lot of things. It comes with, national attention. It comes with nationally televised games and primetime games and things like that. And so I think the biggest thing is just going to be that there's going to be nerves around that, but there's also going to be a lot of excitement about who ends up taking over after Drew Brees. And the Saints have done a really good job. They have now built essentially a vehicle that can either be driven by the quarterback or that can help drive the quarterback if necessary. We've seen that for Taysom Hill. We've seen that for Teddy Bridgewater. And we've even seen it for Drew Brees. There have been times where Drew Brees has won games that he hasn't won, that the team around him has won. And so when you have all the talent that has been built up, there's still a lot of reasons to be excited about it. But I think there will always be a general nervousness of the unknown for what this team is going to look like moving forward if this is indeed Drew Brees' final season.
How far do you have the Saints going in the playoffs?
I will pick the Saints all the way through. I really do think that, up until the Super Bowl, basically, and that's where I'll really have to take a hard look at depending upon who that AFC opponent is and everything. I think that they're a Super Bowl team. They're a team that can get there, and depending upon the opponent, I think they're a team that can win it. I think there are certain teams that provide challenges in the Super Bowl for them, like Buffalo, for instance, who just looks unstoppable right now. Kansas City, of course, they've met before, but they did a pretty good job against. Can they replicate that again and have a better offensive output to put them in a better situation than the regular season? season matchup, all of that. So look, I think that New Orleans has proven at this point, based upon, our very first part of this conversation, that they are one of the most complete teams in the NFL. Now it's just about them getting out of their own way and executing in the playoffs.
Thank you, Lakina, for saving the suspense of Ross giving us the final score for Sunday. I think we can guess for ourselves.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely. Oh, my gosh. Okay.
All right, there was Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at Ross Jackson. That's with 2 S's. Ross Jackson, NOLA. That's once again at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Ross, thank you so much for coming back on the program. Enjoy Wild Card Weekend. Enjoy the game on Sunday. We'll have you back on again soon.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure. I appreciate y'all. Stay safe and enjoy the action this weekend.
You as well.
You
Thank
too.
you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ross. Stay safe.
You too. All right. You want me to just hop off?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Once again, that was Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast network. Wherever you download your podcast, make sure you catch Locked On Saints podcast, especially for you Bears fans listening out there, to get all the information about your opponent on Sunday. Lakina, let's quickly do our picks before we move on to other sports news to wrap up this weekend's show. Let's start off with the Colts in the Bills. That's the first game on Saturday. That's at noon on CBS. Who do you have winning?
I have Buffalo. I think I just think that I trust Buffalo's offense than I do trust the Colts defense, if that makes any sense. I know I've been lobbying for them, all season long, but I think Buffalo's on a mission. I think they feel as though that they have the best shot of beating KC should both the teams meet in championship Sunday. So it's gonna be a close one, but I think I'm picking the Bills.
I'm going with Buffalo as well. I think Indianapolis will stay in there for a while, but I think Buffalo will do enough just to pull away and take this one. Next game, 3:40 p.m. on Fox on Saturday. The second game of the wild card triple header for Saturday. It will be the Los Angeles Rams going to Seattle to take on the Seahawks. I have the Seahawks in this one, Lakina. It doesn't matter who plays quarterback for the Rams. If the Seahawks can establish a running game early with Chris Carson and create a couple of turnovers, this should be an easy win for Seattle. Also, look for DK Metcalf. Hopefully he can have a big game against Jalen Ramsey, but I'm going with the Seahawks.
This might be one of those 9-6, 12-9 kind of games, but I think, look, bat them or not, I think the Seahawks will do just enough to win this game. And just 'cause I don't trust the Rams. The Rams did not play well those last few weeks. I mean, they were able to eke out a win against the Cardinals team that clearly wasn't ready. So I'm going to pick the Seahawks. I just think that they're just a better team at this point in the season.
All right, the last game of the Saturday triple header. You can watch this game on NBC at 7:15 p.m. Central Standard Time. That's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the NFC East champions, the Washington football team. That game will take place in our nation's capital. This could be a potential upset alert game, but I'm going with Tampa Bay. But I would not be surprised if they would lose this game. I'm going with Tampa Bay only because of the experience. Washington, well, they have the defense. They don't have enough on offense. Yes, you have Antonio Gibson, the running back. You have Terry McLaurin, the wide receiver. But I don't think it's going to be enough, especially if Tampa Bay's on all cylinders. So I'm going with the Bucs on the road.
Yeah, I mean, if Washington's offense was a little bit better, I think I would give them a shot. But unless they're gonna, let their running backs, keep, chucking it down the field and keep Brady and his offense off, I just don't see it happening. I think the experience, like you said, I think the Bucs are on a mission too. So I'm gonna pick the Bucs. Although, like I said, I would be surprised if Washington does pull off the upset. This might be one of the upsets. We'll see.
Yeah, especially if Brady can puts up a couple of interceptions. Who is going to get ugly real quick?
Yep.
Sunday. Another triple header on Sunday. First game up, the Baltimore Ravens take on the Tennessee Titans down in Nashville. This is the rematch, as you mentioned, Lakina, of last year's divisional playoff matchup where the Titans dominated 28-12 from start to finish. Will it be the same story, or will Baltimore come out on top? I'll start with you in your pick.
Oh gosh, this is a tough one, but I think Baltimore exercises those demons. I think they will. I think it'll be a close, but I think they'll pull this off. I think this will be one of the first like upsets, if you will. I think they're on a mission. They want to, they feel like everyone's saying that they're dangerous. I think, no one's really talking about them, which look, if you're John Harbaugh and the Ravens, I think that's a good thing if you're them. So
Yeah.
I think the defense will just have to slow down Derrick Henry. I think J.K. Dobbins will have a big day. And I don't know. I'm having a feeling that the Ravens pull this off. What do you think?
For those of you listening exclusively on the podcast, Lakina is wearing a purple sweater.
I am.
So I think I'm going to take the cue and go with Baltimore. As you mentioned, I think Lamar Jackson remembers what happened last year. I think he's going to have a better game. And also, too, Tennessee, even though they have a couple playmakers, especially in their secondary, their defense statistically is not that good. So assuming that the Lamar Jackson doesn't turn the football over, look for them to run the ball consistently. And let's see if Hollywood Brown can have a big game in the wide receiver spot. If those two things happen, I think Baltimore will win. I'm picking Baltimore to win.
Should be a fun one there. Okay, we'll do the night one first. Cleveland and Pittsburgh. Where do you see that?
Your head coach will not be on the sidelines due to COVID. On a serious note, hopefully he gets better and better soon. Number two, Pittsburgh, as we talked about in our last hour, Lakina, I think they'll win this game. I'm going to pick Pittsburgh, but it's not going to be as easy as people think because of their defense, especially with Dupree out for the year with a torn ACL. I think Cleveland can do some things, but as I said earlier, pay attention to the first two offensive series of the game for Cleveland, especially since they haven't practiced on the field all week due to COVID issues. If they struggle and come out with no points, it's going to be a long day. They will have to definitely lean on Kareem Hunt and
Nick Chubb.
I'm blanking out here.
Nick Chubb.
Nick Chubb, thank you. Running the football. That gives Baker Mayfield a better chance to throw the ball down the field, and it gives Cleveland a better chance to keep themselves in the ball game. I think Pittsburgh, even though they're not overwhelmingly offensive juggernaut like they have been in years past, I think they'll do enough to win this ball game. So I'm going with Pittsburgh at home.
Yeah, I actually just saw a tweet from Ian Rappaport that the Browns will actually finally be able to practice later this afternoon. I don't know. Your game's only 2 days away, so I don't know if that's going to be enough. Your coach won't even be on the field. So, do I think it's going to be a blowout? No, but I think Pittsburgh will do just enough to win this game. I'm more concerned about the Steelers' defense. If just give it to Hunt and Chubb, and they'll keep the Browns in it. But I think Steelers will probably pull it out in the end.
And the last game will be the New Orleans Saints hosting the Chicago Bears down in New Orleans on Sunday at 3:40 p.m. on CBS and Nickelodeon. I think the telecast will be the story here, especially on Nickelodeon. We'll give you our reviews on our next podcast coming up next week. As far as the game is concerned, it depends on the health of the Chicago Bears. We all know that linebacker Roquan Smith will not be there. Hopefully, Allen Robinson can see his way on the field along with his wide receiver partner, Darnell Mooney. I think the Bears will need to play ball control offensively. I think it's going to be the same story as last week, but I don't think the score is going to be as lopsided as the Green Bay game. I think the Bears will hang around for a minute, but I think the Saints will take over. I don't think they're going to blow the Bears out, but I think the Saints do have enough up and down their roster. I think they'll have enough to pull away. I say about 10 to 14 points. So I'm taking the Saints to win.
It's just, they got Mooney and Smith as questionable, which is weird because they haven't practiced all week. I don't know if they're trying to, I don't know if like the Bears are trying to keep the Saints on their toes here, but I don't know. But I think, look, do I think it's going to be lopsided as a Green Bay game? No, it won't. I think I give the Bears a little bit of a chance. I'll give them a slim chance to pull off the upset, but I just don't see it happening. I think, like you said, I think Bears by 10, maybe 14 points, because will be a blowout like the Green Bay game was? No, but I think just because the Saints are a better team, I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, it's going. One more thing about the Bears before we move on to other topics. It's going to be interesting to see how Mitchell Trubisky performs in his second career playoff game because he didn't play during the regular season against the Saints. He was in for that one play. He hurt his shoulder, was out for a few weeks. You can make for whatever you will, but like Ross Jackson, our guest on a few minutes ago, it's going to be interesting to see. We all know that Trubisky cannot read defenses, but we'll see what coverages that the Saints defense will give him. Can he adjust to him? If he can, the Bears will stay in this game longer than most people expect. But if Trubisky cannot read those defenses quickly enough, it's going to be a long day.
Absolutely. Indeed, so should be interesting. All these games should be very entertaining this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So enjoy the wild card weekend, everybody.
Yes, food, naps, and lay on your lazy boy sofa, bedroom, whatever. It's going to be fun.
As it always is in wild card weekend. Okay, so some big news, not NFL related news. Well, actually, maybe not. I mean, look, Deshaun Watson, apparently he has been a part of the process for the Texans. The Texans hired Nick Cassero, who is a New England guy, been with the organization for years. Apparently, he was lobbying for Eric Bieniemy. It looks like they're not going to go that route. Chicago people were freaking out because he started following a couple of Chicago weather guys. I mean, no disrespect to Paul Conroy and Mike Jansen, who are both work for WGN, but unless he starts following other media people here in Chicago, I think we should kind of slow down on this. What do you think about all this crazy has been going on here these last 24 hours?
This is all posturing, to be honest with you. Hopefully that the Texans can consult Watson what kind of coach that he wants, unless they know in their hearts that Deshaun Watson wants out of there. But this is all posturing at this point. If the Texans can get Eric Bieniemy down there or someone that Deshaun Watson can feel comfortable with and get the players around him so they can become a better team, then go for it. But this is all posturing at this point. Unless I see something official, this is all about posturing at this point.
Yeah, I think he's just playing chicken here. Like, look, I think he's showing look, I'm not happy with the way things are going here. And, look, you guys need me and I'm keeping you guys afloat. I mean, he led the league in passing yards this season. So I think he deserves a chance to kind of at least be heard out here. And look, you don't have a football people running. You got the family of the owner who passed away suddenly a couple of years ago, and nothing's been right since. You trade your top wide receiver. He's now doing big things in Arizona. So I think people just need to slow down here because I don't even think the Bears have enough to even get Watson, even if they could. A lot of teams probably don't have a lot of the capital. You're probably gonna have 2 or 3 first rounders and maybe one of your top guys. I just don't see it.
I don't either. Especially with the salary cap situation being in flux for at least the next couple of years.
Oh, absolutely. With COVID, everything, COVID and everything else. Yeah, exactly. All right, so some sad news in the world of baseball. Beloved Dodgers manager Tommy Lasorda passed away at the age of 93 earlier this morning. He led the Dodgers to 2 World Series titles. Just very flamboyant. He helped kind of made that the Dodgers mystique, if you will, in the 70s and 80s and into the early 90s. Just a larger life figure, and this is baseball. Baseball world will miss him a lot.
Yeah, we talk about baseball needing big personalities to sell their sport, and especially in today's age with social media and the internet and all that. Like you mentioned, Tommy Lasorda was a big personality guy. And I remember watching the '88 World Series film. You can watch it on YouTube, by the way. Hopefully, MLB Network will replay it this weekend. But I don't know if you remember, Lakina, of course, the Dodgers were led by Orel Hershiser, who had a historic year. I believe he was named World Series MVP, if I'm not mistaken. They beat the Oakland A's in 6 games, of course. Kirk Gibson had that iconic home run off of closer Dennis Eckersley in Game 1. Of course, NBC did that series with Vince Scully, now retired baseball announcer for the Dodgers. And I don't know if you remember, Lakina, but Lasorda had a beef with Bob Costas before that series. I think Costas picked Oakland to win, just like everybody else did as well. And then he sought out Bob Costas if memory serves correct, after their World Series. It was like, yeah, thanks. Thanks, Bob. And of course, Lasorda had that big speech to his team at the end when they beat Oakland in Game 6 of their World Series. So that's one of the many things I remember. I will remember about Tommy Lasorda. He was just a big personality guy. He didn't take any crap from anybody. He was proud and comfortable in his old skin. And also, he helped. He had a few words for Dave Roberts too. Of course, it turned out during that 2017 World Series with the Dodgers and Astros, he told Dave Roberts before Game 7, "You haven't done anything yet here in LA unless you win the World Series." I was just paraphrasing a little bit, but he always bled Dodger blue, and he's going to be remembered forever. He's one of the type icons in that organization. He'll be remembered forever. He's definitely on Mount Rushmore for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And he's the kind of personality that's missed in baseball, like you said, because of marketing and whatnot. So this is a man that was helped bridge the gap. He helped kind of lobby for more diversity in baseball too, and both on the field and in the front office too. As a lot of people don't know that, but look, he's going to be a guy that's going to be missed by a lot of people. So by all of us, baseball fans alike. So, and also baseball personalities too. And he's definitely going to be missed, like I said. And he's the kind of personality that's needed in baseball right now. Those young folks to watch. So yeah,
I don't know if his number 2 is retired by that organization. If it isn't, it needs to be retired now, obviously, because he's no longer with us.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. So our thoughts and prayers go out to him. And also too, Vin Scully lost his wife earlier this week too. She was also very iconic in the baseball circles and Dodgers. So it's been a tough week for the Dodgers organization and their fans, but also as baseball fans too.
Yes, condolences, peace and love to them and their families and their Dodgers organization.
Absolutely. A big trade came down the pike a couple of days ago, Sid, and this actually affects your division in the AL Central. Francisco Lindor just got traded to the Mets. He and Carlos Carrasco, both all-star players for the Indians. They were sent to New York for the play for the New York Metropolitans for infielders Andres Jimenez and Ahmed Rosario, and also right-hander Josh Wolf and Isaiah Green.
Yeah, it's a big trade for both teams. We talked about it on our radio show the last couple of off seasons, looking and when Cleveland get rid of Francisco Lindor. Of course, they don't have the same financial resources like both Chicago teams and like both New York teams as well, along with the Boston Red Sox. But Francisco Lindor is one of the best young shortstops in the game. He has been for the last few years. He's going to help that Mets team. Listening to some New York sports radio over the last 24 hours or so, many of the hosts and certain Mets fans are nervous, and rightly so, because they haven't won a World Series since '86. They haven't been to the big show since 2015. I think they could be competitive, but their roster is not finished yet. Can they still get Trevor Bauer? Will this keep them out of the race for getting George Springer perhaps to join their outfield? We don't know. But I think the Mets are a better team than they were, especially these last few years. Of course, they're under new ownership now, so they're going to spend money like crazy. So it's not necessarily competing with the Yankees like they were 20 years ago when them and the Yankees were battling out for the back pages of those New York tabloids, and the Mets were actually good with Ron Ventura and Mike Piazza and some of those key role players back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So the Mets still have some ways to go, but I think they're a little bit a better team than they have been for the last few years. Now, speaking of my White Sox, I'm going to jump the gun a little bit. I said this to a couple of people on Twitter on Thursday. Thank you, Cleveland Indians, for making this a two-team race between the Twins and the White Sox. There's no excuse for the White Sox now. So Detroit is still rebuild it, even though they got that cheater in AJ Hinch over there now. Kansas City, they got Mike Matheny as their manager. I know they're supposed to take another step. We'll see about that. But those two teams are still a couple years away from seriously contending. Cleveland is right in the middle. You still have Terry Francona, but how much do they have left in the tank? You still have a great pitching staff. You traded a couple of them last year, but how long will that pitching staff hold up?
Yeah,
and then which comes down to Minnesota and Chicago.
Yeah,
the White Sox is.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a two-team race in the AL Central once we do our divisional previews. Like I said, I think they've been the Indians have been wanting to dump salary. They've talked, the ownership has talked about it. So that's trading Lindor and Carrasco. I mean, that's definitely a salary dump. And if you're a White Sox fan, you're happy that Lindor is in the NL East now.
Yeah.
As for the Mets, I mean, I think this will definitely help them be competitive in the NL East. I think this is more about being competitive in the East than it is really about the Yankees at this point, right? I mean, look, they're right there. I mean, look, Atlanta, Philly. I think after the disappointing finish they had to that season, it's gonna be very interesting that NL East, because I think it just got a lot more interesting. Especially, you don't forget the Nationals too, and the Marlins. The Marlins may want to prove that this past season wasn't a fluke. So we'll see.
Yeah, as I mentioned, the Mets have a lot of work to do, especially with the Braves being one game away from the World Series. As you mentioned, the Marlins, they won a playoff series, their wild card series against the Cubs, and of course Philadelphia, which I expect to make a big jump in 2021 under second-year manager Joe Girardi. So it's not going to be easy. You cannot take any days off in that division.
Absolutely, always probably one of the most exciting divisions. Once we do our previews, we'll tell you why. All right, the NBA. Let's go to the NBA hardwood for a second. The Bulls look pretty good. I mean, look, they had a tough one against the Kansas a couple of days ago. They actually play the Lakers tonight, who I'm sure LeBron and AD will probably not be in a very good mood because they lost to the Spurs last night. But what do you think about the Bulls so far in this West Coast road trip?
You have to be encouraged by them coming back from 20-point deficit the other night to beat the Portland Trail Blazers. Of course, Portland's one of the premier teams in the West and one of the premier teams in the league. So Zach LaVine, as we talked about all season long, even though we're a few weeks in now, it seems like he wants to be the man for this team. We all know that he can score the ball, but defensively, he's not there yet, but it seems to me like he wants to get better defensively, become a two-way player. And that's great to see from one of your young stars on the team. I'm using stars as an air quote for those listening exclusively on the podcast, using an air quotes there. But and also shout out to Kobe White. You mentioned a Sacramento loss on Wednesday. He had 36 points, no turnovers, and 7 assists. I like the way this young man is coming out and being aggressive. But he still has a lot of work to do. As I said a couple of weeks ago, I'm not going to throw out the baby with the bathwater. I think that's how the phrase goes as far as him being a playmaker. It's still going to take some time, but I didn't expect him to be John Stockton and lead the league in assists. That's not going to happen. But I think you can start to see some improvement in his game. I compare him to a young Gilbert Arenas. He's an assassin. He's a scorer. He can not only shoot the ball, but he can attack the basket. You saw that if you pay attention closely in that loss at Sacramento on Wednesday. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think, look, the fights. That's why I love with this Bulls team. They fight. This is a fight.
Mm-hmm.
A team that has fight. I think that's indicative of their coach. Because remember, he growing up, in New York, and also too, playing at Providence. I mean, look, he heard it all for not being big enough. You're too small and such. So I think Billy Donovan has framed that attitude toward his players, and I think they're responding. They were down, I think, like 25 points against Portland. They could have ran around and crawled under a rock, but they didn't. And I think I think you're gonna see this a bit of a fight from this Bulls team. Will they win all of it? No. Will they win like 50 some games? Doubtful, probably. But they're gonna fight. You're going to get a fight from them, and they're not going to be pushovers anymore. I think that's the message I think they're going to want to send to the rest of the leagues. And look, we're not going to be pushovers anymore.
Yeah, and this is what we expected when head coach Billy Donovan was hired. It's the difference between his coaching style and Jim Borland's coaching style, who's now part of Portland organization. Go figure that. But this is what we expected to see from this young squad. Who's going to stay? Who's going to go? Or who can respond to this challenge from Coach Donovan? And the thing that the Bulls still need to work on is their defense. And you saw it at Sacramento on Wednesday night. I think Stacey Keem pointed it out on the Bulls broadcast on NBC Sports Chicago. Remember when Buddy Hield hit the three to put the Kings up by 4, I believe? Wendell Carter Jr., and we talked about the Bulls, their lack of defense on the pick and roll.
Mm-hmm.
Wendell Carter Jr. did not step out far enough to give a heat check to Buddy Hield. We all know that Buddy Hield, I know many of you don't watch Sacramento Kings basketball, but I watched enough to know that Buddy Hield, especially you watched him in college at Oklahoma from a few years ago, he could pop it at any time. And I said, ooh, if he hits this three, it's going to be trouble. Guess what happened? Wendell Carter Jr. didn't close out good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Buddy Hield hit the three, and then, of course, Halliburton hit the three-pointer from the left corner. I'm not going to say it wasn't a lucky shot, but as soon as that ball went in, you knew that game was over. So a couple of defensive lapses down the stretch at Sacramento hurt the Bulls at the end. They should be a 2-0 on this road trip, but they're instead 1-1 on this road trip. The one thing I'm looking forward to see this weekend's games against the Lakers and the Clippers, as you mentioned, LaKenna, will they show this fight? Will they be competitive against the two best teams in the West, perhaps the two best teams in the league? Will they be competitive? But they got to put it all together for 48 minutes.
And they haven't been able to do that yet. And I think it's going to take them time.
Exactly.
I think they'll get there though. But I think this is where see what you have, who you want to build around, so that maybe perhaps next season, when you probably will want to contend for the Eastern Conference, I think you can kind of maybe impress a potential free agent. Maybe if you want to get a draft pick, a Cade Cunningham or somebody like that. I think Bulls fans are excited, but I think they're cautiously excited, if that makes any sense.
Exactly. You started to see signs of baby steps, as we said before the season started.
Absolutely. So, but I'm liking what I'm seeing so far. Look, the defense needs a little bit of work. We know this. So, but look, I'm excited for what's to come from this Bulls team. Been first time in a long time.
Yeah.
All right. Now, as overall, in the NBA, what has impressed you so far? Who or what team?
Let's talk about Thursday's game, LaKenna. Did you catch the Denver-Dallas game?
I did. We did.
I know, as we said, it was going to take a couple of weeks for most of these guys to get their feet wet, as you will, because of the short layoff between the bubble and the start of the season on Christmas. But I was very entertained by that Dallas-Denver game. To me, this was the best game from start to finish this season in the NBA. I know we're still a couple of weeks in, but I was entertained from start to finish. Luka Doncic, as I picked to be my MVP, he scored 38 points, 9 rebounds, and 13 assists. Nikola Jokic had 38 points with 11 rebounds and 4 assists as the Mavericks defeated the Denver Nuggets on Thursday, 124-117 in overtime. Jokic hit that game-tying shot from the left baseline to send it into overtime. I was just impressed by both teams. I know Denver struggled to coming out of the game to start the season. So did Dallas too, to a lesser extent, but it was great, entertaining basketball to watch on Thursday.
Yeah, this was a very exciting game. I actually caught the tail end of it. Jamal Murray kind of struggled a little bit. I mean, Jokic led the Nuggets with 38, but Luka Doncic is showing you why he could probably very well end up knocking Giannis off the MVP thresholds. We'll see what happens. I mean, he kind of had he's had a couple of games, including that game against the Bulls last week. But I think now that he's back, I think we'll see more of the Luka that we know and love. As a whole, though, for a team, for me, I have to say Phoenix. Having CP3 there, to kind of be a mentor to some of these young guys like Devin Booker and some of the other young guys on the team. I think also Monty Williams is a great coach. They drained 21 threes to beat Toronto a couple of days ago. So that alone I think is very impressive, and I think the discipline too. And if you're a Bulls fan, you hope it gets to that point that now we have a competent coaching staff. So I'm right. I mean, but I'm looking forward to it. I mean, look. Will they, hang on? But look, you got both LA teams sort of nipping at their heels. Look, I think they'll be right there for a playoff spot. Will they get those top 4 seeds? Who knows? But we'll see. But I'm liking what I'm seeing from Phoenix so far.
Yeah, they lead the conference with 6 wins and 2 losses as of this recording. And speaking of Los Angeles Lakers, looking at they are 6-3 right now. As we mentioned, they'll take on the Bulls on Friday. We'll give you the ugly stats and sights and sounds on on our next episode. But I was watching. Speaking of Lakers, I was watching that game on Thursday against the San Antonio Spurs. I'm not gonna say they didn't want it, but San Antonio. I watched the entire fourth quarter via my computer, and San Antonio, who has actually been playing great lately. Of course, they faced the Lakers last week. And they were very competitive, and they were very competitive on the road on Thursday. They made some key baskets thanks to DeMar DeRozan, LaMarcus Aldridge. Those veterans really came through. They had some big rebounds thanks to Rudy Gay, who's still hanging around for some reason. So I think for the Lakers, we all expected this to happen. Just win you enough games, manage the stars' minutes, i.e. LeBron James, i.e. Anthony Davis throughout the season, because when the second half of the schedule comes out in March, this will be the time for both of those guys and your other veterans who have been hampered with injuries to get healthy to prepare yourselves for hopefully a long playoff run. So the Lakers getting out to a 10-0 start because they had the shortest offseason between the bubble and the start of the season.
Yeah, I mean, look, I wasn't expecting them. I know people were expecting them to be like 11-0 or 12-0 or something like that, or 9-0 in this case by this time. But I don't think, like I said, I don't see it happening either. I mean, look, you're going to see LeBron and AD take games off, from time to time, especially like you said, once we get to the latter part of the season. We're going to see it with Kawhi and the Clippers and the guys there, and it is what it is. I mean, it was a short season. These guys play well into, deep into the bubble. So it's okay. It's fine. I think people need to kind of, not freak out. When you see like somebody lose to, the Lakers lost to the Spurs. Okay. It's going to happen. So, but I will say that the team I am very worried about is the Raptors.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because that, they're not playing in Toronto. They're still kind of adjusting to having to play their home games in Tampa. But I've been lobbying for this team, and now I'm looking like a dummy here, Sid. They've been struggling, and they've given up a lot of points, and I don't know what to think at this point.
Yeah, I'm kind of at a loss for words for Toronto as well, but hopefully let's give them another week or two. If they're still struggling, then they'll have some major problems. But one game I'm looking forward to this weekend, it actually takes place on Friday. Hopefully we can discuss it on our next episode. The improved Charlotte Hornets, even though they are 3-5, they're going to face the New Orleans Pelicans, Zion Williamson, LaMelo Ball. I know he's had some highlights early on in the season. He had a couple during the preseason, but it looks like Michael Jordan, the executive, actually might have a competitive team this year. I don't know if they'll sneak into their play-in tournament, but it looks like that's going to be one of the young and exciting teams to watch.
Yeah, I like what I'm seeing from Charlotte so far. I mean, look, maybe Gordon Hayward didn't look like an idiot when he went with the money and went to Charlotte. I mean, maybe he doesn't look silly anymore. But look, I'm liking what I'm seeing from Charlotte. Cleveland, they had a nice start, but they've fallen back a little bit. Brooklyn, I know people are worried about Brooklyn. They've won a couple in a row, but then,
big win over Philadelphia on Thursday.
That was huge. And, Kyrie and some of the stuff is going on there. We won't have time to talk about that. Maybe we'll talk about it in the next pod. But, New York's won 3 in a row. I mean, look, I want to warn everybody. I know Tibbs, I know Tibbs has, got their guys playing right now, but the same thing with the Bulls, and look what happened. So I'm just going to warn everybody in that front. Boston, they've been playing well, although they've had a couple of guys test positive for COVID, so that's going to be another thing that the NBA has to worry about. So, but so far, I think it's been pretty good. NBA first 3 weeks of the season for the NBA. What do you think?
Yeah, I had to agree with you. You're starting to see better play from some of these teams, and hopefully we'll see better games like we did on Thursday with Dallas, and Denver is going to be more competitive. And hopefully teams start to get into a rhythm. We'll see better basketball. So hopefully we'll see that in the next coming days and weeks ahead.
Absolutely. So to finish up, for the NBA schedule before we go rapid fire here. I'm looking forward to. I want to wait and see like what some of these teams and what these players are going to do with the next week or two. I mean, look, I know I freaked out about Toronto, but I'm hoping they can get it together within the next week or two, because then I'll probably start worrying. But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right, college hoops, right quick. Villanova's had to postpone a couple more games because they're having COVID issues. Penn State in their game against Michigan for tomorrow has been postponed due to COVID. Pittsburgh, they were supposed to be playing Florida State, but now that game's been postponed due to COVID issues. The Illini Knights went against Northwestern last night.
Yeah.
A big comeback win. What's your quick synopsis of college hoops, and what games, if any, are you looking forward to this weekend?
Yeah, give props to the Fighting Illini. Like you said, they had a big comeback win against Northwestern the other night. I'm more concerned about Northwestern. I think their Big Ten record is back at 500 now. I believe at 3-3.
Yep.
Looks like Illinois, they're starting to build some momentum. I like Cockburn. I'm assuming I'm pronouncing his name correctly.
I don't
but
coffee. I just call him coffee. I call it Ao. I'm not even gonna try to put the last names.
But you start to see his game come around in the paint a little bit. As hopefully he starts to take that next step. Io, that point guard, I like him as well. So we'll see if Illinois can take that next step. Northwestern, I'm really concerned about.
Yeah.
Illinois outscored them 56-13 in that second half. It was total domination, and so we'll see if Illinois can take that next step, perhaps become that big time team in the Big Ten. I did catch a little bit of this game last Sunday, even though football was going on. Michigan, our guy Jawan Howard, Chicago's very own, they destroyed Northwestern up there in the Chrysler Arena. Whew.
Oh yeah, that was. I think Northwestern. Yeah, that was brutal. I saw a little bit of that game, and it looks like Northwestern's kind of coming back to earth a little bit. We'll see. Yeah. Maybe so, but who knows? Illinois got a tough one against Maryland on Sunday, so we'll see what they do there. I'm looking forward to Oklahoma and KU. That should be a good one there. Actually, our buddy Spiro Diaz will be on the call for that one as he starts his college hoops schedule. Clemson and North Carolina. Clemson's 9-1. A lot of people don't know that, but this should be a tough one. They actually beat North Carolina for the first time in like forever last year in Chapel Hill. So they'll try for 2 in a row. So we'll see.
Look alive.
Exactly. Texas and West Virginia. That should be a good one. That's a noon game on ESPN tomorrow. That should be a fun one. Also, what else? Oh, Ohio State and Rutgers. That should be a good one there in the Big Ten Network. Both teams have kind of had their struggles lately, so we'll see what happens there over in New Jersey. Like I said, the Michigan Penn State game's been postponed, so yeah. So I'm looking forward. This is sort of like when college who starts getting the full sweep, but then COVID is becoming a big problem too.
Yeah, the issue is how many games they could get in as possible. I'm sure you and Lamont talked about this on our last podcast on Monday, the entire March Madness tournament for 2021. We will have it this year, but it's going to be held in the state of Indiana.
And the way
at least we get the tournament back.
Yeah, and the way they're saying is that I think you're having like all their players and the coaches and all the teams, all the people that are going to have like 6 consecutive negative tests before they'll be able to come in, travel to Indy. So that's something that for the teams, I'm sure the conferences will probably, try to organize that. They've got time to do it. And it's going to be interesting, too, because since the Ivy League decided not to participate this year, so that leaves open for another at-large. Could the Big Ten perhaps maybe see 10, 11 teams this year? We'll see. Should be interesting there. Also, real quick in the college football playoff, because there were some rumblings that maybe Ohio State, they may ask to postpone the college national championship game. Well, Miss Heather Dennis, who does a great job covering, college football for ESPN, says confirmed with both schools. Game on. Bama landing in Miami at 8 p.m. Eastern time tonight. Also, Ohio State will be boarding their plane tomorrow, arriving at 6 p.m. Eastern time. Speculation over. She says repeat, game on. So that answers the question for people who thought that maybe the game will be postponed because Ohio State's still having COVID issues. But it looks like, as Heather says, game on.
Yeah, we all know that big time sports, including college sports, it's all about these big TV networks. We know all of them: CBS, Fox, ESPN. But these are young men, kids. I know they're not kids, but these are young people's lives that are at stake, and they're more important than any big agenda for any big network. So if anything should happen, we should concern about those players. They're humans first. So the heck with these networks. I know everything's being driven by them, but if you don't have enough players to play, they're more important than any big agenda for any big network.
Absolutely.
As I always say in college sports, everybody gets paid except for the players. So
exactly, and that's the unfortunate part. But again, we gotta talk about that. We gotta talk about that eventually, so because that's been a big issue forever in college sports. So
yeah.
We'll see what happens there. A couple of hockey notes there for us, Sid. Corey Crawford has left the Devils, in indefinite leave of absence from the club due to personal reasons. Hopefully everything's okay with him. Doc, with the Blackhawks, I mean, Jonathan Taves is going to be out. That's a bummer there. A fracture in his arm, I think. So that's a tough one. Also, Kirby Doc's going to be out. He's going to be out too for the season. So, a big,
Yeah, this season was going to be a struggle anyway. But now with those stars missing, yes, Patrick Kane is healthy, thank goodness. But it's really going to be potentially ugly.
Yeah, and we're.
I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that.
Well, look. I mean, the Hawks, they got to start off playing against the defending Stanley Cup champion Lightning. So that'll set the tone, I guess. But real quick though, so before we disperse, what are you looking forward to this weekend?
Football.
Me, football and college hoops, and I'll check out a little bit of NBA too. There are a couple of games, like you mentioned, Sid, that I want to check out.
Yeah, those DVRs will be in good use this weekend.
Oh, absolutely, and my laptop will be in full.
Yeah.
On that note, you follow me at Keena McGee on Twitter and at Keena_McGee on the IG. You
can follow yours truly on the Twitter and the Instagram at SidKid80. Once again, that's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. SIDKID80. You can go to our website, weareregalradio.com, for more information, not only about our podcast, but we are great articles from our guys as well. That's WEAREREGAL radio.com. And you can catch this podcast, Second City Sports, along with our other podcast programming from War Media that's in the scope with Josh Hicks, Running with War, That Davis Show, Flipping Friends, all those podcast programming and special programming coming soon from your folks at War Media by simply searching for War on Anchor. Wherever you download your podcast, including that iHeartRadio app, make sure you type in that search engine box, War on Anchor. That's WARR on Anchor. And we're also on YouTube at War Media. Once again, at WARR Media. You can not only listen to us, but watch us do our thing live. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Like, comment, share, subscribe, folks.
Get those likes up, folks. Get them up. All right, so enjoy all the games this weekend. Please stay safe. And look, with the events of, from a couple of days ago, please be good to each other. And just be kind to each other. I think it's not worth it, folks. It just isn't. So for Sid, I'm Lakeem. This has been Second City Sports Zoom style. You guys stay safe, wash your hands, and we'll see you Monday.
First, till next time, holla!